And I'm your host, John Rush to Reason, KLZ 560. Myself, Andy Pate, Charlie Grimes, and we have Mark, Charlie. So we have Mark Mix joining us now as well, president of the National Right to Work Committee. Mark, welcome back. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fine, John. How are you? I hope Andy's okay as well.
I'm doing well, sir.
Yeah, doing very well. We were just talking, actually, in the last hour, spent a whole hour talking about the economy, jobs, Wall Street. We have Jordan Goodman, America's Money Answer Man, joins us, and we really talk through that kind of on a monthly basis. And one of the things that continues to resonate, Mark, is just how many workers we're lacking, how many untrained workers or unskilled workers we don't have that we need, and no, the unions aren't our answer.
Yeah, that's right. You know, their job is to basically create demand in the sense and limit supply, because that's the way they can control a market. I mean,
Correct.
If you're going to have a monopoly, you limit the supply. You know, we go back to the old guild structure back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Even though unionism and the guild structure was voluntary at that time, it was designed to limit the number of folks that were glazing windows or rolling cigars or making hats, and that was the way that they got their economic power. And union officials haven't strayed far from that, except for their adoption of compulsion and special governmental privileges that allow them to force workers to pay union dues or fees to get to keep a job.
We've even heard lately, current administration, Bernie Sanders and others say that, essentially they want this to go even one step farther than it is now, giving some sort of constitutional rights when it comes to, union workers and being able to assemble under the job and so on and so forth. And frankly, that would have to be in addition to what's there now, because there are no constitutional rights for that. I've had people text me and email me, well, John, you've got freedom to assemble. No, Mark, not on the job you don't. That's not the same thing.
Well, that's right. Yeah, that's right. But even if they want to foster that argument, the idea of the freedom not to associate has to exist.
That's right. Thank you.
Logically, the corollary has to be present. And unfortunately, under federal labor policy that exists already, that gives union officials inordinate power over the worker quote marketplace, if you will. I mean, that right to associate is completely eliminated when you don't give them the right not to associate, and yet federal government power and state government power allows unions to be the monopoly voice in the workplace.
Mark, does this rapid inflation bring on unionism? And what I mean is this: all the workers are looking and seeing their dollars and going as far, so they're going to want more dollars from their boss. Push, push, push. They're not getting it. They'll say, we're not keeping up with inflation. We need a union.
Yeah. Well, Eddie, forgive me for not remembering my economics, my microeconomics from college, but, there was those definition of like price push and price pull or something inflation.
Right.
The bottom line is inflation is a government-created problem. When you pump more money into the economy, you're getting more supply of money with the demand, more demand with the money than the supply exists. That increases prices. So yes, what happens to a worker who's on a wage? He says, look, I went to the grocery store last week and a gallon of milk cost $3.50. Today it costs $4.25. I've got to do something to keep up with this. And so then when you increase prices, you increase wages, guess what? You created the opportunity for more demand, which creates more inflation. So what's happened is the government intervention in printing money has caused the inflation, which has that kind of effect of saying, oh, yeah, well, we're all getting hurt by this. The bottom line is it all equals out at the end, because they just continue to increase something that is artificially created. And when you create something artificial, then that causes problems that are manifesting themselves right now, for sure.
We talked also that there just isn't enough training in the trades. And Mark, I blame this on a lot of parents. Parents don't want their kids to be quote unquote, blue collar workers, which I think is a huge, huge mistake on the part of a lot of these parents. How do we fix that? Because right now, being somebody that's in the trades themselves, I don't see us having any influx or any overrun of trade schools right now. How do we as a country get more people trained to do the jobs that are out there?
Well, I think the higher education, and I'm using my finger quotes when I say higher education, and the government school systems are training people that basically, they're going to make those jobs noble again. Because, when you come out of school, and the teacher union official in Los Angeles who said, it's no big deal that our babies didn't learn their multiplication tables, but they did learn the difference between protests and riots and insurrection and coups. I mean, when you have an academic system, government-run academic system that fosters those types of ideals, I think the idea of being a welder or an operating engineer is going to be more palatable to a lot of people and a lot of families. And I grew up with my stepfather being a welder and a machinist union member, and that was noble work. It paid well. And we've talked to people across the country in the construction business that says, look, if you can pass a drug test and show up to work, you can make $100,000 a year in the construction business.
That's correct.
Just do those two things. That's up, Paul.
But, Mark, the schools are doing great. I'm on my 5th gender.
Yeah.
All right, no, I'm not going there with you guys. But, I just we can talk about a lot of things, but boy, oh boy, I'm with you. Trust me,
I appreciate what you just said a moment ago. I do think some of these other jobs will come back and be more noble. The problem is, Mark, we don't have 5 or 10 years for that to happen. We don't have 5 months to have that happen. We need an immediate fix now, and I don't see it coming.
Yeah, well, I think you're right about that, and there are problems. There's no question about it. And, a lot of those problems, just when you boil them down and you look in the pan after everything else has been reduced, you see government, the hand of government in all of this.
That's right.
And unfortunately, the increase in regulation, the increase in control, and increase in taxes and the size and scope of government have led to all this. And, I forget how you explain that Hegelian dialectic. They create the problem, they create a solution, and then the solution creates more problems. And that's what government's done.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a real easy solution. There's a really easy solution in the workplace. Take away union monopoly power, and I suspect that those unions that provide services to workers will grow and prosper by representing workers that choose to be part of their organization, are not compelled to do it. And the government has that same type of power. In fact, I'm sitting in the parking lot of our city council meeting. I'm going to a city council meeting tonight in Fairfax City, Virginia. I'm going to oppose a creation of a new storm rain tax that they're going to try to impose on us. That if our roofs receive rain, we have to pay a tax on that stormwater. I mean, their intentions are good, but where does it end? I mean, it doesn't. It really is an amazing
The problem is if we don't stop it as voters, it doesn't end, Mark.
That's right. And that's one of the things we have to do, John. We have to hold politicians accountable. And if there's a clarion call right now in the American marketplace and in the American economy, we have to hold our politicians accountable. Your governor out in Colorado, I'm interested to hear him talking about the COVID emergency and income taxes and things like that. And he seems to be more receptive to this than anybody here in Washington, D.C.
Well, he's seeing the writing on the wall.
He wants
to
be
now.
President someday, so he knows this is the direction he has to go, Mark. He has no choice.
That's right.
Mark, let me ask you about this politically. Let's look at politics and your job. Because your job, let's face it, you fight unions, okay? And you do this nationwide. What is it going to be like for you over the next 6 to 8 months with an incredibly desperate Democrat Party trying to get in pro-union initiatives everywhere they possibly can before they get wiped out in November?
Well, and you're exactly right about that. In this so-called Build Back Better bill, we call it the Build Back Big Labor bill because there are so many things in there that give government money to unions. For example, the apprenticeship program, back to what you were talking about, John, how do we train the contractors? How do we train welders? How do we train operating engineers? Well, one of the ways that happens is through apprenticeship programs. You won't be surprised that the government is now going to put their finger on the scale and say that only unionized apprenticeship programs are going to get money from the government, and that the independent apprenticeship programs that are set up by contracting firms are going to be out there on their own, and they won't be able to compete at all. I mean, and then the idea of giving a tax credit on a union-built electric vehicle as opposed to, most of the electric vehicles in the country that are built by a company that's not unionized. I mean, these are the types of things that go into what is eventually going to be about a $4.9 trillion Build Back Big Labor bill that includes union wages on construction projects that raise the price of construction that's funded with government money from anywhere from 10 to 30%. I mean, these are the types of programs that are going to rush through. And Andy, to your point, the policy window is closing dramatically because, like you said, your governor's seeing it. The accountability is increasing, and the policy window is closing, and the political window is opening. So they got to rush this stuff through, and that's what this is all about right now here in Washington.
One last thing I want to leave with you, Mark, just something to noodle on and think about, and maybe there's a way you guys as an organization could even help promote some of this. But I talked to an individual yesterday where the homeschooling trend if you would, 8 million new homeschoolers that were added to the rolls, if you would, in 2021. And I talked to a gentleman yesterday, and he hadn't even thought about this the way I did. You talk about an opportunity to build apprenticeship programs in the trades through those homeschoolers. Granted, not every homeschooler wants to be in the trade. I get that. But you know what? A lot of them, if they were taught how much money and what they could actually do with their own families and the freedoms that are there with it, if they were taught some of those things, you talk about the ability to put some on-the-job training of 14, 15, 16-year-old kids that could be ready for the workforce relatively quickly. There's an entire workforce sitting there that nobody's tapping into.
Absolutely. And one of the things that's going to happen after the COVID and after the stuff that we're seeing politically is that type of choice in the educational structure and breaking that government monopoly over education is going to be something that's going to be real. It's happening now, and it may not happen quick enough, John, to meet your timetable, but it is happening. I remember when I went to high school, there was what we called the BOCES program, where you went and learned how to drive a backhoe and operate a backhoe and a crane and all that. Mm-hmm. All that stuff's gone away, and it's really unfortunate. And hopefully there's a private sector solution to that. And that private sector solution comes with encouraging parents in that regard. And I know that parents are now paying attention to the educational product their children are receiving.
Yes, which is good, by the way.
That.
Hey, Mark, can I throw one more political question here on demographics? Because Hispanic voters have traditionally been pretty strong for unions. They've been helpful. Biden, who is very pro-union, won Hispanic voters by over 30%, and yet all recent polling shows it's within 3 to 5% now between the two parties. Does this bode poorly for the pro-union people who have been trying to ride the Hispanic wave?
Yeah, I think so, and I've seen those numbers too, Andy. And the idea of the immigration policy fits right into that too. I mean, these people are looking to try to protect their jobs, protect their lifestyles, their opportunities, and they see an immigration program that's out of control. There's lots of implications of all of that, but certainly from a government and from a union perspective, I mean, it used to be 30 years ago, unions, the AFL-CIO, were the greatest opponents of unlimited, uncontrolled immigration. Now they see it as a final frontier of revenue stream in the private sector for bringing these workers in, being able to organize them and tell them that they can't survive in the country without union protection. I mean, I think politically that's changing, and it's changing very quickly.
Mark, how do folks find you, sir?
Well, they can find us at that amazing internet at www.nrtw.org, nrtw.org.
Perfect. Mark, you're welcome anytime. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
You bet. Have a great evening, and good luck on your council meeting.